Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're diving into the life of Indira Gandhi. And wow, you've given us some amazing material to work with.
Yes.
Archival interviews, historical explainers, even a whole biography channel. So clearly, you're after more than just like a basic rundown.
Oh, absolutely. I think what's most exciting is how these different sources give us, such unique perspectives.
Right.
Like we have Indira's own words from back in 1976. We
Wow.
can see how modern historians analyze her political moves, and we even get these personal anecdotes that really,
Yeah.
bring her to life as a person.
It's like we're piecing together a puzzle, right? We
Exactly.
want to understand not just what Indira Gandhi did, but like who she was.
Yeah.
Like what shaped her worldview? How did she handle all those pressures of leadership? And then, what were the consequences of her choices, the good and the bad?
Right. And that's what makes this deep dive so fascinating, because her legacy is still like
Oh, yeah.
fiercely debated.
Yeah.
Some people see her as this champion of the people.
Uh-huh.
Others see her as this ruthless authoritarian figure.
Yeah.
I think our goal is to, not to judge, but to explore all those
Right.
nuances and complexities.
Okay, so let's start at the very beginning.
Okay.
Indira's childhood was, well, it was anything but ordinary. I mean, imagine growing up during India's fight for independence.
Yeah.
With your dad, Jawaharlal Nehru, as a central figure in the whole movement.
And don't forget about Mahatma Gandhi.
Oh, right.
Like a close family friend,
Yeah.
Indira wasn't just reading about these events in a textbook.
Oh,
She was living them,
wow.
absorbing these philosophies, seeing those struggles firsthand.
Right.
It's no surprise she became such a powerful figure herself.
It's incredible. And it wasn't just passive observation either.
No, not at all.
The sources show that even as a little girl, Indira was already involved in protests.
Oh, yeah.
There's even one account that mentions her getting beaten by police for raising the Indian flag.
Wow.
Yeah. Pretty powerful image, right?
Yeah, I mean, it speaks to this
Yeah.
early fearlessness, like her willingness to challenge authority, even as a child.
Yeah, and it wasn't just her father's circle that had strong female figures either. Her mother, Kamala Nehru, she was an activist in her own right.
Yeah, and she's often overlooked by history.
Yeah.
But she organized boycotts, endured hardships during protests.
Right.
She really set a powerful example for Indira.
It sounds like strength and resilience were like
Oh, yeah.
deeply ingrained in her from the very beginning.
Absolutely.
And then there's this fascinating story about how Kamala would dress Indira as a boy.
Oh, yeah.
It's true.
I love that story.
Which led to her father nicknaming her Indu boy.
It's so interesting, right? Like this blurring of gender lines.
Yeah.
It's a theme that echoes throughout Indira's life, don't you think?
I do. It makes you think about how these early experiences, these subtle messages, maybe they shaped her outlook in a way.
Right.
And speaking of shaping influences, her relationship with her father was, well, it was complicated, right?
Very complicated.
Nehru was often in prison for his activism, so they didn't always have a ton of time together.
That's an important point.
Yeah.
It's easy to, to romanticize their bond.
Right.
But the reality is their relationship was deeply affected by these long absences.
It makes you wonder, like, did she resent his dedication to the cause?
Yeah.
Or did it fuel her own desire to lead, to step into that role?
To kind of fill that void.
Yeah.
It's a good question.
These are questions worth thinking about. And amidst all the political turmoil, there's this human element we shouldn't forget.
Absolutely.
While taking care of her sick mother, Indira met her future husband, Feroz Gandhi.
Oh, right. And it's important to note,
Yeah.
no relation to Mahatma Gandhi.
Right, exactly.
Just to be clear.
Yeah. It's crucial to remember she wasn't just this political figure.
No.
She was a woman who experienced love and loss. And the ups and downs of family life.
Yes.
These details, they add another dimension to understanding who she was.
For sure.
Absolutely. So after this tumultuous childhood, this whirlwind romance, she heads off to Oxford for studies.
Right.
But the sources point out she never actually got a degree.
Yeah.
Possibly because she was so focused on her relationship with Feroz.
That makes me wonder, like, how much did a formal Western education really influence her compared to her Indian upbringing?
Right.
Was she more shaped by the philosophies of Gandhi and Nehru?
Yeah.
Or the intellectual environment of Oxford?
Yeah, it's like trying to untangle these threads
Exactly.
of her intellectual tapestry.
Yes.
And speaking of complex threads, her marriage to Feroz had its own challenges too.
Oh, yeah.
He was known for criticizing her father's government even while she was,
Oh, wow.
managing his political campaigns.
Talk about a tricky family dynamic.
Right.
That must have been tough.
It seems like she was never afraid of a challenge, though.
No, clearly not.
And those skills, they were put to the test as she rose to power.
Yes.
Which is a story that takes us from, the silent doll to a political powerhouse.
Yeah, exactly.
But before we get into all of that, what's standing out to you so far about Indira's early life?
Let me think. What's really striking me is how much she experienced even before entering politics. It's like all these things, family, activism, education, love, it all comes together to shape her later leadership.
Yeah, it really is a fascinating tapestry.
It is, and it only gets more intricate as we follow her into Indian politics.
Right.
So after Nehru's death, there's this huge power vacuum.
Yeah.
And Indira, she becomes a key advisor to the new prime minister, Shastri.
Uh-huh.
But she seems hesitant to, really step into the spotlight.
It's like she's watching from the sidelines,
Yeah.
learning the ropes.
Yeah, exactly.
She biding her time?
Yeah.
Was she afraid of being consumed by the political machine?
I think the sources offer a few clues here.
Okay.
Some suggest she was carrying the weight of her father's legacy, and she wasn't sure she wanted to step out of his shadow.
Hmm.
Others say she was very aware of the political landscape and waiting for the right moment.
Right, and that moment comes with Shastri's sudden death in '66.
Exactly.
The Congress Party, they're looking for someone to unify them, and they turn to Indira.
Makes sense.
She's Nehru's daughter. She's a symbol of continuity. But could she actually live up to the expectations?
Well, it wasn't an easy transition.
No.
Remember, the Congress Party was full of experienced politicians and different factions.
Oh, yeah.
She had to navigate all of that and prove herself, not as Nehru's daughter, but as a leader in her own right.
Right, and she did become India's first female prime minister.
She did.
But it wasn't a universally celebrated victory, right?
No, not at all.
Many people, even within her own party, they saw her as a gungyugudia, a silent doll. They thought she'd be easy to control.
Yeah, they underestimated her.
Totally.
But it's amazing how quickly she shattered that image.
Uh-huh.
One of her first major moves was splitting the Congress Party in 1969.
Wow.
A really bold move.
Yeah.
It consolidated her power.
Right.
And showed that she was willing to challenge the status quo.
It's like she's saying, I'm not here to play by the old rules. I'm here to change the game.
Exactly.
And that reshaping, it extended to her policies, too.
Oh, yeah.
Like the nationalization of banks in '69.
Right.
That was a huge effort to bring financial power to the people.
This was the key part of her socialist agenda.
Right.
To lift up the poor and break the control of the wealthy elite.
The impact of nationalization is still debated, though, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
Did it actually help the most vulnerable people?
Right.
Or did it hurt economic growth and create inefficiencies?
It's a complicated legacy for sure.
It is, and the abolition of privy purses in '71, that just adds to the complexity.
Definitely.
I mean, on the surface, removing those privileges for former rulers, it seems like a move towards equality, right?
Yeah, but the sources highlight how it also created resentment.
Right.
Among those who felt targeted.
It's like these policies make us confront the unintended consequences of social engineering.
Right. Was true equality achieved?
Yeah.
Or did it create new forms of division?
It's a question that's still relevant today.
Very much so.
And then there's the Green Revolution.
Oh, yes.
Maybe one of her most ambitious and impactful initiatives.
Definitely.
It's amazing how this agricultural reform, using modern technology and high-yield crops, it transformed India from a nation facing famine to one with food security.
It's hard to deny the success of the Green Revolution in boosting food production.
Right.
But like any big intervention, there were long-term consequences.
Yeah.
Some sources point to the overuse of pesticides, the depletion of groundwater, and the displacement of smaller farmers.
So we see this pattern again, right?
Yeah.
Triumphs intertwined with unexpected challenges.
It's like every step forward creates ripples.
Yeah.
And understanding those ripples is key to understanding Indira's impact.
And ripples, they just get bigger as we get to the period leading up to the emergency. But before we get to that, what's standing out to you so far? Anything piquing your curiosity? It's that kind of push and pull, the champion of change, but also using like really strong tactics. The Green Revolution's a good example. It helps with food, but then what about the environment in the long run? It's tricky.
Yeah, no, it really is. And that's what makes her so interesting to study this constant struggle with different priorities. And that really comes to a head in the period leading up to the emergency.
Right. So 1975, Indira's facing a big crisis, despite all her achievements, the Allahabad High Court judgment.
Right. This is where things get, well, pretty dark.
Yeah.
She's found guilty of electoral malpractice in the '71 elections.
A huge deal.
Huge. And it really shook India. Was it a fair verdict? Or was it a political attack?
Yeah, the sources, they don't really give us a clear answer.
No, it's hard to say for sure.
But regardless, it had a big impact.
Absolutely. The opposition, they see an opening. They want Indira to resign. There are protests.
Wow.
Even within her own party, people are starting to speak out.
So she's feeling the pressure from all sides?
Yeah, like the walls are closing in.
And in this chaos, she makes a decision that changes everything for India. She declares a state of emergency.
June 25th, 1975, Indian democracy. It's essentially suspended.
Wow.
Civil liberties. Gone censorship, rampant arrests, thousands of them without trial.
It's kind of hard to wrap your head around.
It is. This goes against everything India fell for, freedom and justice.
Yeah.
And Indira's son, Sanjay Gandhi, he plays a key role in this whole thing.
Right. Sanjay had a lot of influence during the emergency.
Yeah, he did, and some of his policies are still very controversial.
Like the mass sterilization campaign?
Exactly, trying to control the population. Men, often from the poorest communities, they're forced into sterilization, often in terrible conditions.
Yeah, the sources describe the fear and trauma people went through. They hid to avoid getting caught.
And the psychological scars, they last a long time.
Yeah, and it wasn't just the sterilization campaign.
Right, there were the slum clearances.
Thousands of families displaced.
All in the name of urban renewal, but carried out with this brutal efficiency.
It shows the dark side of progress,
It does. It reminds us that even good intentions, at least the stated ones, they don't always lead to good results.
And it's even more complicated because some sources talk about positive changes during the emergency.
Oh, yeah? Like what?
Less corruption, more efficient government services, even just a sense of order.
That's a tough one.
Right. It's a paradox, and historians are still trying to figure it out.
Did the emergency, with all its problems, actually have any lasting benefits?
Or did the harm outweigh any good?
It's a question worth asking.
It is. And then after almost 2 years of absolute power, she calls for elections in 77.
What? Really?
Yeah. Was it a genuine attempt to bring back democracy? Or did she misjudge her popularity?
Maybe she thought people liked the strongman approach.
Right.
Or maybe there was pressure from other countries or even from her own party.
Whatever the reason, she loses. The people had their say, and they voted against her.
It's a powerful rejection of the emergency and everything it stood for.
A turning point for India. It shows how strong democratic ideals can be.
Even after something like that.
But Indira Gandhi, it doesn't end there.
No, she comes back to power in 1980, proving she's a real political force.
Right.
But her final years are, well, pretty turbulent.
You're talking about Operation Blue Star?
Yeah, 1984, the military operation at the Golden Temple.
A really controversial move.
Yeah, a dangerous one. It caused a lot of casualties, angered Sikhs.
And ultimately led to Indira's assassination.
By her own Sikh bodyguards.
In October of 84.
Tragic.
Yeah, her death set off those horrible anti-Sikh riots.
Just a terrible, terrible situation.
It adds another layer of tragedy to an already complex story. So where does this leave us with Indira's legacy? Champion of the poor, but also an authoritarian figure.
Right, a symbol of female power, but responsible for human rights abuses.
It's really hard to define her.
Yeah, she doesn't fit into a neat box. Was she a flawed hero?
Or a villain who did some good things?
Maybe the most important takeaway is that there are no easy answers.
Yeah, it's been an amazing journey exploring all these different viewpoints, trying to piece together this puzzle of her life.
It really has. What are your thoughts now, looking back on everything?
I think what stays with me is how relevant her story still feels. Her successes, her failures.
They teach us about power, about how complicated social change is.
And about how fragile democracy really is.
Exactly.
And as we face our own challenges in the world, her story is a reminder.
Both a warning and a source of inspiration.
Yeah, I think that's a great note to leave our listeners on. Indira Gandhi's life was full of brilliance, ambition, and, sadly, tragedy.
Understanding her choices, the good and the bad, that can help us make sense of our own times.
It can, and maybe as you keep digging into those sources,
Yeah.
you'll find new insights, new ways of seeing this incredible figure.
Someone who continues to fascinate and challenge us, even decades later.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the life and legacy of Indira Gandhi. Until next time, keep exploring.